thanks to the Lord with my whole heart. I will recount all of your wonderful deeds. I will be glad and exult in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. You may be seated. Dear Father, we thank you for everyone gathered here now. Dear Father, we thank you for everyone gathered here now. Thank you that you know each of us by name and have called us to walk with you. We say we are dependent on you and our trust is in you completely. As we surrender ourselves in adoration, we ask that you will come by and inspire our hearts today. Come fill our lives with your love. Fill our conversations with your grace and truth. Fill this prayer breakfast with your presence. We ask this in your glory and praise. Amen.
Amen.
Welcome to the Board of Stewards Martin Luther King Jr. Prayer Breakfast. Welcome, lovers of God and those loved by God. We come today to give our heart, minds, and soul and all our energy and adoration of God. At this time, we will have our scripture lessons. Old Testament, Mr. Stephen Murray. New Testament, Mrs. Beverly.
Amos 5, 21 to 24. Using the NRSV. I hate and I despise your festivities, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and gain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of the well-being of your fattened animals, I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an even flow stream.
Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report. If there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. Amen.
At this time, let us turn our hearts and minds inward and be led in prayer by Mrs. Portia Leslie.
morning. I need thee every hour. Eternal God, I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. Let us bow our heads. Eternal God, thank you for this day. Thank you for going and giving us Dr. Martin Luther King. Also, thank you for those who paved the way. Mrs. Rosa Parks, who sit down and held her seat. Thank you for letting us live to witness a black man run the nation, and a black girl, and little black girls could see a black woman as our First Lady. Now, Lord, I ask that your spirit come to cover this nation. We are in terrible times. But dear God, I ask also that you will pick our hearts, that we may be able to stand for justice, stand for peace. And dear God, I ask that you come into the midst of this program and bring your spirit, that the stewards will shine and do the work that you would have us to do. These, Lord, and so many other blessings, I thank thee and I ask thee in your name, Christ. Amen. Amen.
Let us blend our voices together and sing the opening hymn, This is the Day. On justice and prayer.
Here. Can I hear? Michael. We can't hear you. Is better? No. How Martin Luther King Jr.'s prayer life moved him to act for justice. Father Brian Nazaret. Martin Luther King Jr. was martyred for his uncompromising advocacy of equal rights for all. He died shortly before he was to make an extended retreat at the Trappist Monastery at Gethsemane in Kentucky under the direction of spiritual master Thomas Merton. This retreat receives little attention in celebration of King's life, but it points to something essential for understanding his importance to Christian believers. We are familiar with his leadership as civil rights activist. Our challenge is to move toward an appreciation of King as a man of faith. His Christian ideals and religious convictions not only grounded his political strategies, but also provided the reservoir of courage needed to endure racial persecution, unrelenting harassment, and the constant threat of death. Without an appreciation of King's faith, our understanding of the man and the movement that transformed America is both limited and inadequate. King never advocated prayer away solutions to personal or social problems, but believed that prayer alone was insufficient for social change and was often used as an excuse by Christians to avoid facing difficult social situations and issues. King insisted that prayer is an essential dimension of social engagement and never a secondary force in the quest of justice. One of the most important lessons we can learn from King is how he harmonized his personal piety, intellectual ability, and social vision. King severely criticized both those who dismissed the relevance of prayer for social action and those who lived what he called a disembodied Christianity, divorced from an active commitment to racial and economic justice. He provides a model for the kind of socially engaged holiness that our nation so desperately needs. One of King's spiritual disciplines as a young pastor was carving out significant time each week for prayer and meditation as a part of his sermon preparation. Later in his life, even in the midst of a crushing speaking calendar and the incessant demands of national leadership, King often would spend what he called a prayer-centered day in a motel while he traveled, longing for the real spiritual renewal obtained through inner quiet and contemplative prayer. He was deeply realistic about the transition of evil and how it heals only in the face of determined action and persistent challenge. King believed that the struggle against the triple evils of racism, poverty, and war required the combination of prayer, intelligence, and sustained activism. King's own prayer life is a witness against opposing spiritual maturity and action on behalf of justice. Amen.
A special breakfast for you today. A plate of love, a bowl of peace, a spoon of hope, a fork of care, and a glass of prayer. At this time, Reverend Ernie Moore will come and bless the food. After that, please follow the direction of our preacher steward, Mr. Tommy Bott.
Let us pray. Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for Dr. King and what he represents. May we, in our gathering here, never forget that we are servants for you one of the shining examples of servitude. Now, Heavenly Father, we ask that you bless this food that we're about to receive. Bless the hands that have prepared it. If there be any impurities in it that will bring harm to our spiritual bodies, we curse it in the name of Jesus. This we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Don't smile, I'm not going to call you either. So, good morning to everyone. We're going to try to do this as expeditiously.
Christ was born across the sea with love in his bosom that transfigures you as he died to make men holy. Let us die to keep me free. Oh, my God is
Of our speakers by Reverend Ernie Moore. The next voice you will hear will be that of our speaker for the occasion, the Honorable William T. Newman, Jr.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to thank the Board of Stewards for allowing me the privilege to introduce the speaker for the 2019 Martin Luther King Jr. Reverence. But before my introduction, our pastor, Reverend Dr. Adrian B. Nelson II, asked that this letter be read. To this morning's speaker, the Honorable William T. Newman, guests, members of Lomax Board of Stewards, and members of Lomax Church, and other guests. I greet you in the name of Jesus, who is Christ. Some of you know that I am unavailable to be with you this morning. On the occasion of the Board of Stewards' annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Rev. Breakfast. Because I'm the chairman of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Breakfast that is being sponsored by the Montgomery County, Maryland chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. This morning, we're expecting nearly 900 guests to attend, and Bishop W. Darren Moore, our bishop, will be the keynote speaker. As a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated yourself, Judge Newman, I hope that you will excuse my absence as I'm engaged in the work of our dear and illustrious fraternity, of which Dr. Martin Luther King was also a member. And members of the Board of Stewards and Lomax Church, I hope you will excuse my absence as well. Our bishop is speaking at the breakfast and I am chairing. This morning I appreciate that each of you, and I hope that you be treated to a thorough and timely remarks by Judge Newman. And as you reflect on this year's theme, justice, are we waiting or working? Based on Amos, the 5th chapter, the 24th verse. There the prophet Amos is recorded as saying, "But let justice roll on like a river, righteous like a never-failing stream." Please enjoy a wonderful program that has been planned by the Board of Stewards, what I know will be a delicious meal by the Hospitality Committee, and the insight of Judge Newman. May this morning's breakfast serve as a catalyst to you for more commitment to the ensuring justice is rolling like a river from the White House to the jailhouse, and righteousness like a never-failing stream in each of our lives. Signed, Reverend Dr. Adrian B. Nelson II, Pastor, Lomax St. Zion Church. To our guests and members of the Lomax Board of Stewards, to the members of Lomax St. Zion Church, William T. Newman Jr. has been a judge of the Commonwealth of Virginia's 17th Judicial Circuit, covering Arlington County and the City of Falls Church since 1993. Judge Newman grew up in Arlington, Virginia. He is a graduate of the Ohio University, where he received a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree with honors. He received his Juris Doctorate from Catholic University's Columbia School of Law. From 1977 to 1980, he was a staff trademark attorney with the U.S. Department of Commerce. The other achievements of Judge Newman's outstanding career can be found in his bio in your program. I've known Judge Newman for over 50 years. We were Boy Scouts in Troop 589 at Mount Zion Baptist Church. We both attended and graduated from Wakefield High School. And lastly, I can happily say that I've never faced Judge Newman professionally. I introduce to you the Honorable William T. Newman Jr., Chief Judge of the 14th Judicial Circuit.
This to me is a great honor to have been asked to come on this very cold morning to this, the annual Lomax AME Zion Board of Stewards Martin Luther King Jr. prayer breakfast. Let me say thank you to Reverend Moore for those kind and warm remarks. We do go back a long ways. In fact, I remember when I was a little boy in short pants, he used to babysit me. But I am humbled by this opportunity to share my thoughts with you today. You know, first, and right off the bat, let's get one thing straight. The reason you asked me here today is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the single greatest man of my lifetime, if not everybody's lifetime. But you know, he was just that. He was a man. No more, no less. Every day his brow drew sweat. Every day his eyes grew heavy and his shoulders weary. And every day his feet hurt and would smell of leather and preparation. Just like yours or mine after a long day. But you know, Dr. King was a man. Nothing more, nothing less. And make no mistake, Dr. King, a spiritual leader for the ages, in addition to working to put food on the table for his young family and checking his children's homework before bed at night, had more than his fair share of long, hard days. But for some reason today, over a half century after he was taken from us by the twin bolts of ignorance and hatred, you know, he's become something more. Something so much more. You know, in our mind's eye, over the years, we somehow managed to sand down Brother Martin's rough edges and plaster over his many human flaws and mortal imperfections. And in the process, we put ourselves in a place where we now honor a man who is more than a man. Someone who now stands so far beyond the person each and every one of us has it in us to become that we find it almost impossible to wrap our brains around. We've managed to turn Dr. King into someone who, in our mind's eye, we could never be, or never, heaven forbid, try to be. You know, it's easy, you see, to just throw up our hands and sit back and marvel at his greatness, if not his downright godliness. We're not great, we think to ourselves. He was great, and we could never be like him. But you know, that there's the rub, my friends. That there's the rub. Because especially on this day, every year in which the whole world stops to honor him by turning Martin Luther King Jr. into something more than a man, something greater than a living, dreaming, but ultimately far flesh and blood mortal, like you and me, is to diminish the life he led and diminish the remarkable things that in his too short time he was able to accomplish. And that's critical to us. My friends, are not critically dangerous, especially in this day and age. Dangerous in these fiercely divided and often violent times in which we find ourselves. The trembling sliver of history now awash in unleashed ghosts of unchained demons. Because you see, when we turn Dr. King into a God, someone sent from above, someone sent from the Lord himself as a prophet and martyr to lead us to the promised land, we take all the responsibility for spiritual fortitude, for peaceful resistance, and for moral courage, responsibility that should be ours. And we put it squarely on his shoulders, while at the same time absolving ourselves of it. Because I know, believe me, it's far easier to do that than it is to actually look in the mirror and be honest with who and what you find staring back at you. In the course of the past 50 years, in the 5 decades since his passing, Martin has become our Sunday go-to-meeting answer to any and all problems in our lives. I mean, he's the guy whose business card we whip out at the first sign of trouble, or whose photo we point to at the first trace of injustice or inhumanity. But you know, I'm telling you here today, especially today, Dr. King can no longer be our answer. He can no longer be our excuse. No, my friends, beginning today and from this point forward, Martin has to start becoming our reason. The reason we start to change who we are as men and women, if not as who we are as a people. The reason to take ownership of our lives as individuals and our role as children of God. And the reason we finally wake up to the fact today, here and now, that there is no more Dr. King. at least not that Dr. King, a few of us grew up watching and were shaped by. There really is only us, his children, God's children. And as I said, it's critical for us to understand that, my friends. It is critical for us to accept that as great a role model as Dr. King was, as great a legacy as he left, and as great an inspiration as he remains. The things he brought to mankind and the things he shared with men of all colors, every last one of them, we must now and from evermore seek not outside those doors, but within us, within our hearts, within our souls. You know, if Dr. King taught us anything in his time, it was these two things. One, that in the never-ending battle of love versus hate, love will ultimately conquer all. Love will endure and love will abide. And two, that if anyone's going to change the world, they're going to have to do it not one country at a time, or one state at a time, or even one neighborhood or street, or even one house at a time. You know, if we're going to change the world, we're going to have to do it one heart at a time. Your heart, my heart, the heart of the guy down the block, the heart of the young lady at the drive-through window, and the heart of the clerk behind the counter, or the cop on the street. You know, these are troubled times, my friends, and I don't really have to tell you that. And hate, as we are now reminded almost every day, does not die. And in fact, if left unchecked, hate only increases in size and strength, and above all in frequency. Oh, it may grow dormant at times, and it may dress itself up in fine clothes now and then, and it may move among us and pass itself off as something as close to normal. But it does not die, and it will never die. That is a harsh and cruel fact of life, my friend. Like it or not, hate is always lurking just around the corner. And that's why I say it never dies. It is merely kept at bay. And that only comes when people like you and me, the righteous, stand up and are counted. When righteous people like us join arms, and when good people like the ones we're trying to be draw a line in the sand and say, no more. Today, once again, right outside those doors in this country of ours, we have politicians. Yes, we have politicians, men and women in the highest reaches of society, not to mention government, who, while they may not be racist, they regularly say and do racist things. But make no mistake, my friends, even if all those men and women are not racist, virtually every one of them is a product of a racist era and what is still a racist country. And many of their spirits have been shaped and their minds formed by the most insidious form of racism of all. A racism that over the years has become institutionalized and normalized. A racism that is acquired and learned and passed from one generation to the next. One that is deep-rooted and culturally ingrained into the souls of otherwise decent and well-intentioned people. A racism that continues to shape how many of this country view not just the world about them, but the people in it. That's why many of these men and women, particularly a number of political leaders on the federal level, continue to want to define you and me, not by the content of our character, as Dr. King once dreamt, but truly by the color of our skin. Because that's easy, especially for them. Because for a certain type of individual out there today, to look at our skin, to look at your skin and to look at my skin and to think of us all as the same, with the same mind and same heart, becomes an exercise in intellectual shorthand and not moral laziness. So many elected officials these days, right up to our tweeter-in-chief, Pennsylvania Avenue, continue to think of you and me and to treat you and me, if not all people of color, not as individual men and women defined by our deeply personal and specific sets of life experiences, but as just so many lockstep thinkers and believers. They don't see you and me as individuals. They see us nothing more than the pigment that they see on this corporeal flesh, a layer under which resides the very heart and soul of who I am as a man, and the very heart and soul of who you are as a man or woman. A layer under which resides the essence of who we are as citizens and who we are as Americans. And the layer under which, above all, resides the beloved child you and I are and will always be in the eyes of the Lord Almighty. Which will lead me back, my friends, to Dr. King and the content of character. For better or worse, you know, America has always been a meritocracy. As people, we have to learn to accept and understand. And the theory is in this country is that you get what you earn. At least that's how it's supposed to work in theory. But as we all know, it hasn't always worked that way, because there remains, even to this day, a long, dark, winding road between theory and practice. Thanks to generational plagues of prejudice, ignorance, and hatred. For years, if you were a brother or a sister in this country, just showing up for work every day and doing your job was not enough. You know, since our emancipation as a people over 150 years ago, we could never be just good enough. No, to even have a chance in this meritocracy we call America, we needed to be excellent. And that was just to get our foot in the door. If we wanted to write songs, we couldn't be just any hack at the piano. Oh no, we had to be Duke Ellington. And if we wanted to have those songs and get them played on the radio, we had to be Lena Horne or Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald. If we wanted to study law, we couldn't be just some simple country lawyer. We had to be a giant of the law. We had to be Thurgood Marshall. And that's why Branch Rickey turned to Jackie Robinson to break baseball's color line and to perform the most important job in the history of American sports. That's why in World War II, when our generals needed help from the skies above, they turned to the best they had. They turned to the Tuskegee Air. These men and women weren't just good, my friends, or good enough. They were historically good, as good as the world had ever seen. And for the better part of the 20th century, when our people were constantly having doors slammed in our faces or being told that there are no seats left at the table, what made us matter to America at large and what finally earned us a seat at the table was our unspoken, indomitable quest to be the best we could be, and maybe the best there ever was. You know, there was a time when our parents instilled in their children, and those children taught it to theirs. And this unspoken but unrelenting desire for personal excellence burned in our people's souls, and it drive us for generations, even as so many in this country tried to deny it, and us. Because without achieving excellence, there will be no opportunities for our people, no growth, no fulfillment, and most of all, no American dream. But you know, somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that. Something along the line, it became that just good enough was good enough. For seasons and reasons, or far too complicated to address here, we stopped demanding excellence. And not just in our children or families, but more importantly in ourselves. We stopped demanding excellence within ourselves. And you know, that has to stop. And that's my message to you today. Because Martin, if anything, embodied excellence in our people. He believed in excellence in our people, and he dreamt on excellence in our people. And on this, the day we celebrate his life and we warm our hands to the glowing embers of his memory, I ask that you pick up the torch that we have somehow let drop. I urge us all to make a commitment to becoming the best people we can be in whatever tasks or missions or journeys we choose to undertake. I urge us to demand more of our children and more of our political and religious leaders, and to demand at least the pursuit of excellence in them as well. I urge us to redouble our efforts to fund our schools as they should be funded. I urge us to turn these schools once more into magnificent cathedrals of learning and veritable shrines to the development of a child's heart, mind, and soul.
Yes.
You know, as Dr. King dreamt, it's not about the color of our children's skin. It's about the content of their character. And make no mistake, they get their character from us. They get it from the things we say and the things we do. They get it from the institutions we create and the priorities to which we bow and pay fealty. Young men watch how grown men behave. They listen to the things we say and they pay mind to the things we hold dear. For that reason, and for the first time in 3 generations, it is incumbent on our men to stand up and make an accounting for themselves and to answer for how they live their lives. It's incumbent upon our men to assume the responsibility of manhood and the responsibility they have to all those young men and women who are following in their footsteps. And it is incumbent for men to not just be physically stronger than women, but they must be morally strong as well. For too long, the women in our communities have been at the core of so many of our families and have had to carry this burden all by themselves for too long. And it's now time for our men to rise up and help those women share the load. The content of our character, my friends, is more than just an ideal. It's more than a line in a speech. Content of character is the basis, if not the very core of Dr. King's dream. You know, I know. I was there that day. I was a 12-year-old boy sitting on a limb in a tree, just a few yards from where history was being made on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I heard Martin's words that day. I felt the fire within their truth. And I knew, even as a young boy, that he was not just giving us a speech or even sharing his dream. He was throwing down a gauntlet and letting it fall at our feet. For he knew even then that it was up to us to choose whether or not to pick it up. And I stand before you now 50 years later and say that we've let that gauntlet just sit on the ground where it was left, barely touched. But that has to end. That has to end today. For you see, hate is rising, my friends. Character and morality are on the run. And excellence is hiding in fear for its very life. The time is now. The day has come, and I urge each and every one of you to look inside yourselves, to look inside your soul. Find that person that you've always had it in you to be. The person who your grandparents and great-grandparents were taught by their mamas and daddies to be. And then set that person free. Unshackle him or her from the bonds that shackle us all. The bonds of being just good enough. Demand excellence in yourself in a way you never have before. Demand excellence in your children. And demand excellence in their children. Breathe life back into Martin's dream and celebrate his day. Celebrate today by vowing to breathe life back into yourself and the shell of a person you've let yourself become over the years. If we're ever going to beat back the hatred around us and much less change the world, we're going to have to do it as Dr. King taught us. We're going to have to do it through love. And more than anything, you're going to have to do it one heart at a time. And that line of hearts starts with your own. Thank you, my friends. May the Lord bless and keep you. And may his light shine upon our lives forever.
Did you eat? I know, I thought about it too. But you didn't. That's the important thing. You did not. Now, Judge Newman said that we are all getting a little complacent. We know what ought to be done, but it's easier sometimes to stay in our bed. It's easier sometimes to stay at home. It's easier sometimes not to get involved. And more important, it's easier sometimes not to serve. Because serving sometimes requires you to say to yourself, am I going to sacrifice something? Do I have to take a position? And now you know the generation of people that you came from. You know the civil rights movement and what it presented for all of us. That probably many of us wouldn't be in the position that we're in today without that movement. And like Judge Newman said, the challenge is to deal with that now. It's to deal with our complacency. It's to deal with what Martin Luther King said was that we all have a moral responsibility as human beings to make sure that justice anywhere is dealt with. So Judge Newman, thanks for reminding me. I'll take my position. Thanks for reminding me today just how complacent I am and the challenge that I must meet. I have a son and a daughter, and the challenge that I need to present for them as first a father and then as an individual in our society. Thank you very much. I want to thank him. Let's give him another round of applause. And then I want to thank the Board of Stewards. If you are on the Board of Stewards, will you please stand so that I can look you in the eye and say thank you? Yeah, I know. It's like I said, you got to deal with those challenges. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Reverend Moore, for coming out. Thank you, Mistress of Ceremony. I appreciate it. Thank you, Donna, for that wonderful song. Thank you for all the musicians that supported her. Thank you all. And you know, if you don't feel inspired, just take a moment. And if you were like me, I took notes because Judge Newman dealt with so many things. And if you took one note that said something special to you, I saw some of you doing that. Don't forget it. Don't forget it. Whatever it was, if it was a mental note, a written note, however you can remember. God bless you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.